The Manilow Method podcast is a production by Logan Allen and me, Barry Harris. Now, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Manilow Method. If you're new here, thank you for joining us for the first time. My name is Logan Allen. That's my co-host, Barry Harris. This is a bonus episode. This isn't going to be nearly as long as some of the other long-form episodes we put out. Fingers crossed. But over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about Copacabana, the movie, Barry Manilow's only movie. It was released in 1985, and it was based on his 1978 hit song, Copacabana. There are a couple things we forgot to mention in the main episode, and today we're also talking about the stage version of Copacabana. It was turned into a legitimate musical. So, Barry, you want to get us started?
Yeah, so a couple things to clean up from our discussion of the soundtrack. We spent last episode focused only on the movie, but there's a few bonus elements from the soundtrack that were not in the film. There was specifically a 1985 remix of Copacabana. It's the first of many Copacabana remixes that was created by Barry Manilow over the years. Again, 1985 was the very first time that he remixed and re-recorded Copacabana. What's notable about it is that it is re-orchestrated in addition to being given a more 80s dance rhythm, but the orchestration has changed. One last cleanup item from the soundtrack is that Barry Manilow recorded a solo version of Caramba. It was produced by Bob Gaudio and Barry Manilow, and it's really interesting because it sounds very contemporary for the time. It's a new Latin rhythm song for the 80s, as if Copacabana was a Latin rhythm song for the 1970s. Caramba was maybe more meant to be the Copacabana for the 1980s, and it seemed like it was something that was crafted with the idea of having single potential. But as we've noted, the Copacabana soundtrack was recorded for the RCA records, and we noted that there was some issues that they ran into, that the Manilow tracks really weren't well promoted by RCA. But you can go back and check out our discussion to hear more in depth about that. But those are the cleanup items for the soundtrack. But now we're going to move on to something that we actually know a lot of you have been commenting about this. Were we ever going to talk about the stage version? Well, here we go. There actually was a soundtrack released from the 1994 stage version, and it is absolutely incredible. You know, I listened to it one time when it first came out in the 90s. I never revisited the soundtrack from the stage version in 1994, but interestingly, when I went back to listen to it, I realized it is a hidden gem. Logan, when you listened to this, what did you think? What was your reaction in listening to this, the 1994 UK stage version soundtrack?
There are so many things from this, little moments that have stayed in eras past this. I wasn't ready for it because I never really explored this. I wasn't around for when this happened. I wasn't around for when it came out, so I never really explored it. In exploring it for this, there are little things that it's like, oh, okay, so that's where that bit came from. I know it from a bit that happened in the future, but this is where it came from originally. Walk us through one or two of those, Barry.
Yeah, so interestingly, it starts with an overture that's very similar to the Copacabana movie, and then it begins with Copacabana just like the film version, except it's a remixed version of Copacabana. This remixed version of Copacabana sounds like it's Copacabana reimagined for the 1990s. Yep. But what's so notable about it is that there's two elements in this initial version of Copacabana. The first is there's this moment where they start and they're chanting the lyrics, "At the Copacabana, woo!" And what's so hilarious about that is, as we tape this, Logan and I literally saw Barry Manilow in concert just a few nights ago, and that's what happened during the extended outro. They start they start shouting, "Everybody shout at the Copacabana!" Well, that comes from the stage version of the show. Barry Manilow then held that over and integrated that into his live version that he does to this day as we tape this. And then another element that was interesting is that it features this dance piano, this dance keyboard, and that element was an element that was retained for the David Benson 2005 Copacabana remix, which uses a dance piano track. So again, two musical elements that, later show up in the Manilow universe. But one thing to also say before we move on about Copacabana is the framing of the whole musical has changed from what we last talked about. We talked about the film version that just focuses on Tony and Lola and flashing back to 1940 and telling their story. We've got a completely different plot device. This musical is through the eyes of a character named Stephen, who is trying to write a musical. He's trying to write a song, Copacabana, and that's the whole plot, is that he's writing the song and imagines what is the backstory behind this particular song. And here's an interesting irony, Logan. The lead character of Copacabana the musical is named Stephen. Is it any coincidence that one of the greatest songwriters of all time for the Broadway theater was Stephen Sondheim? Logan, do you think that was a conscientious tribute to the man, Stephen Sondheim?
I think with the amount of things that we've talked about on this show that seem to come up, little details like that we speculate on, there's been enough of them at this point that I am starting to lean towards the response of, I'm not sure anything's a coincidence.
I agree with that. So I think that might be a subtle tribute to Stephen Sondheim that the lead character is named Stephen, but it makes for a more interesting way of looking at this for the stage version. So he starts the story at the beginning, and this is where a brand new song is introduced into the musical. It's called Just Arrived, and it is Lola's first song, and I absolutely love Just Arrived. It's such a grand opening statement, and in fact Manilow himself adapted it and used it as an opening number in 1996 when he toured the United Kingdom, and he went on to use it in 2004 to open his album Scores, which contained the songs from Copacabana and Harmony. So curiously, Logan, any thoughts that you have on Just Arrived?
I personally know it more from Scores because that's more my era is what we'll say. So I've gotten used to him singing it. So going through this and listening to the actual cast singing it actually showed me how it was more tailored to the stage version and not just him doing it, because obviously the Scores would be a little closer to what it was like him doing it live in the mid-90s. So I really think that the stage version brings a little more of that Broadway sense out of it, and when Manilow sings it, it's more kind of just this hello, welcome, happy song.
And so the next song that we wanted to talk about is Dancin' Fool.
Right.
And that was from the Swing Street. Well, it originally appeared in the Swing Street special. It was recorded apparently during the Swing Street sessions. It was not on the album, but it was used in the television special on Swing Street, and Dancin' Fool, as used in the television special, was included on the complete collection and then some box set. It was a compilation, 4-CD compilation released in 1992 that celebrated Barry Manilow's career with a compilation of greatest hits, outtakes, and live performances, and that was one of the outtakes that was included. But we hear it here on this particular soundtrack from the stage version, and something shocked me when I heard this, and that is, Logan, do you want to tell them what was shocking about this when you started to hear this for the first time?
We are 97.8% sure that Manilow himself is one of the background vocalists on this song. Barry, I flipped out. You flipped out. We both flipped out. It was crazy listening to that for the first time and hearing that.
Another interesting fact about Dancin' Fool as it exists on the stage soundtrack from 1994 is that the backing track is the exact same version that Manilow used in his version on Scores. He just simply removed the vocals and used his own vocals. So that's quite an interesting connection, that this project that was done in 1994 had so much legs. It was so great that he was able to repurpose a lot of the orchestrations and even recordings from this soundtrack into his own versions in 2004. Do you have any final thoughts on Dancin' Fool, Logan? Because I know that this is a song that you're particularly attached to.
Well, the reason I'm so attached to it is because I was introduced to it through the First and Farewell DVD, the One Night Live, One Last Time, the DVD that they released of that off of the 2004 tour. That was my first time hearing the song. And come to find out, in 2005, about a year before I was born, my parents took a trip to Las Vegas and they saw Manilow at the Hilton, and he did Dancin' Fool. So my parents have actually gotten to hear Dancin' Fool live, which I will forever be jealous of, and Kai Brackett had a huge dance break in it, and it was so good. But this is one of my favorite, I would say it's one of my favorite Manilow swing songs. And honestly, I would be interested to hear how it would have fit into the mold of Swing Street had they used it on the actual album instead of just on the special.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to have heard what that might have sounded like. So we're going to move on. We're going to speed through a couple things here. This next song is called Night on the Town. Now, I didn't recognize it at first when I read the title, but as soon as I listened to it, I realized, oh, it's a rewrite of Let's Go Steppin' from the film. So that is that. And Who Needs to Dream, one of the greatest Manilow songs ever, is right here, a beautiful love song. And Gary Wilmot, we want to take a moment to recognize him. He plays the role of Tony in the stage version of Copacabana in the United Kingdom in 1994, and his vocal performance on this song is absolutely excellent here on Who Needs to Dream. And now we get to another song that is brand new for the stage show. It's called Bolero de Amor. It has a copyright date of 1986. Again, it's another big highlight for me because it's such a grand arrangement. There's so much happening. The bridge section in between the main section of the song and the final chorus is just so expansive. Logan, I'd like to just hear if you have any comments or thoughts on Bolero de Amor. What a explosive song this is.
Well, once again, a lot of these songs I'm more familiar with them coming off of Scores, just because that was more, it's the Manilow discography. It's not a cast of people singing Barry Manilow songs. I just gravitated more towards the Manilow versions. But it's throughout this and the rest of this album, just listening to these songs and comparing Manilow's version on Scores versus the actual cast of the show singing the song. With this specific song, I don't know if I can pick a favorite between the two of them. I think they like you said, they're both just so big, and at the end, wide is a good word. Wide is a good word for the ending of this, I think. It's so enriching to listen to. I really can't get enough of this one.
I actually like what you just said, wide. That's a great description. That it is if there's ever a wide song, this would be one of them. That's a good description, Logan. So the next thing I want to talk about, Sweet Heaven, I'm in Love Again. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot on this channel in the last couple of weeks, but there's a reason we want to bring this back up, because we actually had a recent viewer letter get to us from one of our viewers, Stuart, and they pointed out that there's a song from the musical Follies from Stephen Sondheim. It's called Waiting for the Girls Upstairs, and the very first line of this song, Waiting for the Girls Upstairs, is "Hey up there." That is, those first three notes are the first three notes of Waiting for the Girls Upstairs, and the first three notes of Sweet Heaven is "Hey down there." So clearly, I don't even want to say conspiracy theory. That is a direct reference to Stephen Sondheim. And now to tie this to the relevance to the stage version, they changed that melody slightly. Gary Wilmont's vocal, he starts it with, "Hey down there," so he doesn't use the exact same 3 notes as Stephen Sondheim. And notably in the scores version, when Barry Manilow went into the studio to record songs from both the Copacabana and Harmony musicals in 2004, when he sings Sweet Heaven, he begins it with, "Hey down there," but for all intents and purposes, when we hear the original version from the Copacabana film soundtrack, where Tony Barry Manilow begins the vocal with "Hey down there," he is directly referencing Stephen Sondheim. So, Logan, what's your reaction to this viewer little tidbit that we just got served?
We knew that Manilow was a huge Stephen Sondheim fan. When Sondheim passed away, he posted a cover on his social media of the song "With So Little to Be Sure Of," and that was actually the B-side to Once Before I Go, when they put that out on vinyl as a single. I can't say it shocks me that there's this reference to a Sondheim track. I will say it does kind of shock me how blatantly obvious it is. Now, obviously, if you don't know the catalog of Sondheim, because, I mean, you and I aren't Sondheim aficionados, if you don't know the catalog, you don't know where to go searching for it, so you wouldn't really find it. But we're so thankful to our new friend Stuart for telling us about this, because this is ridiculous how obvious it is that he took inspiration from that. It's not even inspiration, it's the same thing. In fact, 2 of the words are the same. So I mean, it is as close to, I'm not calling it a rip-off, it's just a nod. It's it's just an acknowledgement of an inspiration. But it's about as close to a rip-off, I think, as I've heard Barry Manilow do.
Well, I think that's what it is. It's a loving homage. I think this is done from a place of absolute admiration and love, and I think that is actually so amazing that there are these references. And funny enough, for our viewers, we're getting close to the end of our 2nd season here, and I'm already thinking that one of the things that I want to do in the off season, in between season 2 and season 3, is listen to some soundtracks from Sondheim musicals. Maybe we'll find some more roots and some more references. I would love to dive into that. But for any of you out there who watch and listen to our program, especially if you have a lot of Broadway experience, we would love you to write us themanilowmethod@gmail.com and share with us if you've heard any motifs or ideas that you've heard in musicals, specifically Sondheim musicals, that you think have ended up in Barry Manilow records and arrangements. We would love to hear from you. Okay, so let's move forward and talk about something entirely new to the stage version. It's a song called Who Am I Kidding? It has a copyright of 1994, and it's for a new character that we didn't see in the film version. The character's name is Sam. He is the owner of the Copacabana nightclub. And what's really particularly interesting about the character of Sam is that when the show toured the United States in the year 2000, I got to see Copacabana live on stage, and playing the role of Sam was Gavin MacLeod. So I got to see Gavin MacLeod play the role of Sam in Copacabana, the stage show. And what's interesting about this is I think there was a necessity. In order to adapt from film to stage, they needed to expand the number of main characters, and they needed characters who could sing. And there's also another song that they had to add for another character, which is called Welcome to Havana, a 1994 copyright, and that was sung by another character. So there's another character named Conchita. Now, we do see that role in the film, and it plays an important part in the plot, but it's really expanded in the musical for the stage, and Conchita is actually given a song, Welcome to Havana, to sing. And one thing I want to point out, Logan, and I want to give you a chance to weigh in on these, I noticed that the song Changing My Tune did not make it to the stage version, much to our disappointment, but there's a lot of inside jokes for musicians that maybe only you and I would get. But the song Changing My Tune did not make the stage version. However, what does survive from Changing My Tune is there is a Carmen Miranda reference in Welcome to Havana. So, Logan, I want to turn it over to you to make some comments about some of these new songs that were written for the stage version.
So, Changing My Tune is one of my favorite sequences in the Copacabana movie. So, given that it didn't make the leap from the screen to the stage, I still do like this little nugget that we get in Welcome to Havana. That's still kind of, it's obviously an homage to Carmen Miranda, but it's still kind of, giving a little nod to the people that know Change in My Tune from the original movie. I think that was a really fantastic inclusion. I think both of these songs are a different kind of genius than we've really been able to see from Manilow, because you said these characters are being expanded upon. And in 1985, when they made the Copacabana movie, they were expanding on the song. So that was already a ginormous task. Take a 3.5-minute song and expand it to a 90-minute movie. That's already ridiculous. But to take the 90-minute movie and translate the song that was translated to a movie and then translate it to a musical and expand upon the expansion, that has to be ridiculously hard. I cannot imagine how much time they had to spend on that. And both of these songs are such great examples of just, you would think they've done it a million times before. Honestly, they are so good and they're seamless. They fit the story so well. And it's just a fantastic expansion of an expansion of an expansion. I love it so much.
So here's another song that was added to the stage version. It's called This Can't Be Real. Again, another bombshell of a beautiful love song. This time, it's a duet between Lola and Stephen. Because remember, the plot device that's new for the stage version is that this is coming through the perspective of a songwriter who is creating this world. And he has fallen, the real life character Stephen has fallen head over heels in love with Lola. And so hence this situation, this can't be real. They both try to come to terms with the fact that they have a fantasy of a relationship together, and it's so compelling. And of course, on the Scores album that we keep mentioning, Barry Manilow did it as a duet with Olivia Newton-John. What a great union of two powerhouse vocalists from the 1970s. Do you have any comments, Logan, on This Can't Be Real?
I have to say, once again, I'm sounding like a broken record on this episode. I'm more familiar with the Scores version than I am the stage version. And honestly, I might prefer the Scores version just a little more over the stage version, just because you have the meeting of the voices of Manilow and Olivia Newton-John. Those are two iconic voices from the same era that I just think they blend so well together. And it's along the same lines of, Manilow working with Barbra Streisand, Manilow working with Reba McEntire, Manilow working with these golden female voices that they all complement each other so well that I think there are very few times, if any times at all, that I think a Manilow duet has struck out, regardless of if he's singing it or somebody else is singing it. So while I personally prefer the Scores version a little more than the stage version, this is a beauty. I would almost say this is kind of the Every Single Day of Copacabana. Every Single Day from Harmony is the big love song. I would say this is kind of on that same level. Even though they're kind of getting a different point across, it's still in that same vein, I think.
Yeah, you're right, because there's already Who Needs to Dream in Copacabana, right, which is a singular character singing a one-way love song, but this is a two-way love song and two different perspectives. But again, Who Needs to Dream is sung by Tony.
Right.
And by the way, we didn't mention this, but maybe it's obvious to those listening and watching, but let's clarify something. The role of Stephen and Tony is played by the same actor. So they just change costumes, and the person that's playing Stephen, they step into their fantasy and live it, and they walk through Tony's shoes, just to make that clear, if that wasn't clear before. So Who Needs to Dream, Tony's singing that. But This Can't Be Real is Stephen and Lola, so this is now a completely different dynamic, a completely different perspective. Okay, now I think of all the things that we're going to talk about here, this might be the biggest part of what we want to talk about and why we're spending time doing a bonus episode. Okay, so Mermaid's Tale is the intro to the song El Bravo. We were kind of really geeking out over something really interesting, and that is that Copacabana, the musical, has a distinction of having a musical within the musical. And what we know about that musical, at least from looking at Copacabana, the musical, is that Lola starts by performing at the Copacabana, and that's where Tony is there. They're both at the Copacabana. And then the plot involves Lola being lured away to the Tropicana, which is in Havana, Cuba. And Tony is not invited to go along with her, so she leaves on her own. And when she gets to the Tropicana, she's cast in the role of this musical. And one of the songs in the musical is a song called El Bravo, and that's featured in the film version of Copacabana. So here's where this gets interesting.
I'm so excited.
So we've always wondered, this musical within a musical, is there anything else to this? You know, because they definitely wrote a song, El Bravo, and then this A Mermaid's Tale, or The Mermaid's Tale. This is the introduction to El Bravo, and it's called a separate song for the stage version. And so as we're digging, we started looking in the copyright database to look at registrations made by Barry Manilow and Bruce Sussman and other writers, and we started noticing that there's a bunch of titles that were registered in the year 1986, and they mentioned that they're from something called Away to Pago Pago. So we were kind of perplexed. What is Away to Pago Pago? So we formed a conspiracy theory that Bruce Sussman, Jack Feldman, and Barry Manilow were trying to write a musical called Away to Pago Pago. And so we pondered this, and then Logan, I think you can maybe fill in the last piece of this because you were there to serve up the last piece. We're thinking, Pago Pago, what is it about Pago Pago that you would write a musical for? And so, Logan, tell the people what you told me and how this suddenly just made sense.
So it was a little while ago that we found these references to Away to Pago Pago in the copyright database. So we've been kind of letting that simmer in our knowledge. We knew we wanted to bring it up at some point on the show, but we couldn't really figure out how it was really going to fit in because we don't know anything about it. We don't know what the plot is. We don't know what the theme is. We don't really know anything. So as we were preparing to film our episode about Copacabana, the movie, we were obviously watching it numerous times, and the El Bravo scene happened, and I just remember being struck by, this is insanely awesome. They're taking a song, expanding it into a movie musical, and they're putting a scene from a musical in the movie musical based on the song. So already that's multiple levels of deep. And it struck me that we know that there's this idea of Away to Pago Pago. We don't know what it's about, but we know there's an idea of that. And I had this thought that what if El Bravo was potentially a song that either would be in or was the basis of something to do with Away from Pago Pago. So I did a little research into Pago Pago, and what clinched it for me is Pago Pago, one of the things is pirates. And when I read that, I read that about 2 minutes before we sat down to record the Copacabana movie episode. And I told Barry that, and we had to delay the start of the taping because we went down the rabbit hole to try to find this out. So, ladies and gentlemen, tinfoil hats on, please, everybody suit up. We believe that if the song itself was not meant to be included, we believe that the musical inside the Copacabana movie was the launching pad for potentially another musical called Away to Pago Pago. Now, we've been wrong on this show before. We've made that known. We are not saying this is true, but it would be pretty wild if it was. I think there's enough there to kind of suggest that maybe there's something to do with it. And in fact, I will say this. we've been reading a lot of Barry Grams recently, the quarterly magazine that they used to put out for all things Manilow. And in fact, we have a viewer named Lou who actually sent me a bunch of his old Barry Grams, and he gave me a copy of the very first Barry Gram, and it had a column in it written by Bruce Sussman about the writing of Copacabana, because the first Barry Gram was published in 1978. Copacabana was the new thing at the time. Bruce wrote a column on Copacabana and was talking about the story of the song, who shot who, and Tony and Lola and Rico. And he mentioned that at that time in 78, Rico has a continuing story. He said that he and Manilow and Jack Feldman, they're the only ones in the world who know what happens to Rico after Copacabana. What happens to the characters in the song after Copacabana? I'm speculating that potentially maybe that story could have evolved into what they tried to do with A Way to Pago Pago. That might be the biggest conspiracy theory we've launched on this show. I guarantee you we're going to clip this at some point and put it out there. But we would love to know your thoughts. Please write to us, themanilowmethod@gmail.com. Message us on Facebook or Instagram. We'd love to know your thoughts, because I am fully invested in this. What about you, Barry?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to keep going on this. We're going to keep pulling on this thread to see if we learn anything else. But there's a couple ways that this could possibly work out. So, A Way to Pago Pago. So, I'll tell you what my interpretation is, just to reset here, because we just gave you a lot of information.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's a musical within a musical in the Copacabana musical, and El Bravo is a song in that musical within the musical, because Lola is performing in it at the Tropicana. So I think it's entirely possible that El Bravo comes from the musical A Way to Pago Pago. And one of two things I think could have happened. One, Bruce, Jack, and Barry sat down and wrote out that entire musical, or wrote some songs of it, called it A Way to Pago Pago, to set up what that musical was like and what was happening in it. And El Bravo happens to be one of the songs from A Way to Pago Pago. That's one theory. Another theory is, post Copacabana musical coming out, they might have decided that they wanted to try to expand the universe and tried to take El Bravo and expand it out and make it its own musical and see what other songs are there. So I'm not sure what would have come first. We know that a lot of titles that say that they're were written for A Way to Pago Pago was registered in the year 1986. That doesn't mean they were written in 1986. They could have just been cataloged and registered in 1986. But here, again, a massive conspiracy theory we're going to open up, that Barry Manilow, Bruce Sussman, and Jack Feldman wrote another musical called A Way to Pago Pago, and it perhaps could be El Bravo expanded, the musical that was within the musical, that they actually did some sort of artistic work and treatment to it to make it more than just one song that just happens to appear in the show. So that is our conspiracy theory.
I love it. I love it so much. Let us know if you love it too. We would love to get your thoughts on that, because that, I do believe, is our most outlandish conspiracy theory, because we are basing it on one tiny little thing when compared to we're building all these other things around it. So please let us know your thoughts. If you have a different view on that, we'd love to know. But we do know for sure El Bravo is a musical in a musical, and we do know that a show called A Way to Pago Pago was at least partially written. So those two things are guaranteed. Go with that. Let us know your thoughts. Barry, let's keep going.
All right. So we have three more things, and then we'll wrap this up. So, number one, we're going to wrap up the stage soundtrack, the 1994 UK stage version soundtrack, with the reprise of Copacabana. Logan, I have another conspiracy theory about this final version of Copacabana.
Lay it on me. Go for it.
So it turns into an ensemble coming out and singing the song Copacabana. They build it up this whole time. They tease Copacabana, the song, and finally, at the very end, they sing the song that you know and love, Copacabana. They sing it in full as the cast and the whole ensemble is on stage. But then, obviously, it needs a really cool dramatic ending, so it ends with this big last note, and they all sing, "Don't fall in love," and at which point the orchestra starts playing. And Logan, they start playing I Write the Songs.
Wow.
So at the end, when they hit that last note, don't fall in love, the horns start playing ba 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 ba. So they tease I Write the Songs at the end. Yeah, go listen to that. It's going to blow your mind.
That's fantastic. What a cool way to end the show, too.
Yeah. Okay, so two more things we want to talk about before we wrap this up. Number two is, so after this 1994 stage version in the United Kingdom, like I mentioned, in 2000, it went back to do a tour of the United States, which I was so fortunate to see. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for taking me. And for this production, Barry Manilow and Bruce Sussman themselves wrote more songs for this touring version, and it's called, the two songs are When You're a Copa Girl and I Gotta Be Bad. Now, this is hilarious. There's not a lot for us to talk about here. The only thing that we have is we have a published musical score of this, but there's no officially available video for us to see a production of this, and I have to go off of my memory, which is very fuzzy, so unfortunately there's not a whole lot that I can explain. So what I'm wishing for in the future, in the next, as long as we're doing this series, if somebody mounts a production of Copacabana, I don't care if it's in Australia or something, I'll go. Maybe we'll both go, Logan, you and me. We'll go and we'll see it, just so we can, get all these details that we don't have. But there are more songs that Barry and Bruce wrote for Copacabana. And then that will take me to my last thing here, is the retrospective comments on Copacabana. Clearly, that Manilow wanted to launch a career for him and Sussman to be playwrights. They wanted to be Rodgers and Hammerstein. That's what they wanted to do, and that's what they sought out to do at the beginning of their career. And as Bruce always likes to say, Mandy got in the way of that,
right,
of them having that kind of a career. And Bruce, in his own words, has said that Manilow brought him kicking and screaming into the pop world. And so this Copacabana project was clearly a launching pad, a springboard. And in the early 90s, their musical harmony started to take shape, which clearly is one of Barry Manilow's dearest passion projects. And with that mounting of the stage version in started off in 1990. It was a simple show for the casino in Atlantic City. It was a nice way that you could have a musical that was not necessarily going to be a Broadway musical, but it's something that could fit very nicely as a production in a space like, I believe it was Caesars, I think was what ran it. Yes, Caesars in Atlantic City is where it ran. And so it ran there, and then the next version was in the United Kingdom in 1994, and then in 2000, this is at the point where Harmony had gotten a whole lot more serious.
Right.
Harmony actually got an actual tryout in California in 1997, and so with Harmony really launching and, starting to gain steam, it's almost as if they leveraged Copacabana, knowing that people would want to pay to see that, and hope that would help establish their profile, establish their credibility in the theater world.
Right.
And so I think that's why Copacabana was so prominent as a musical throughout the 1990s and the 2000s, because this was trying to elevate them to a higher level as playwrights. And I love that they did this. And of course, Harmony is again another magnum opus by Barry Manilow, and I think you can see the roots of Harmony through this particular project. Well, that's all we have to say. So Logan, I'm going to toss it back to you to give the audience your final thoughts, and you can take us out of here.
This has been great. We decided to try something a little different. Barry kind of led this episode and kicked it to me. I kind of liked the little change of pace. We might try to do this a little more in the future. I really enjoyed it, and we hope that you enjoyed it too. If you're not already, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at The Manilow Method, and at themanilowmethod@gmail.com. Please give us your thoughts. Give us your conspiracy theories. Please tell us if you liked our theories. If you think we're out of touch, we don't care. Just let us know. We'd love to know your thoughts on everything we talk about here. Thank you so much for taking a chance on this show. We really enjoy doing this for you, and we're so happy that so many of you have found us. And if this is your first time, welcome to the Manilow Method family. We can't wait for you to check out more of what we have to offer. We are so very close to wrapping up our second season here. It feels so weird to say that, but we're almost done with our second season. So we thank you if you've been along for the ride, whether for near a year at this point, or if you've just been with us for a few minutes. We really appreciate it. I'm Logan Allen. That is Barry Harris. We will see you next time on the Manilow Method.